It's 8 o'clock, live from the world headquarters of GB News. This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Should the Tories get rid of Rishi Sunak and call a snap election with the new leader? Does going into the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? And was Winston Churchill a hero or a villain? Big stars, big stories, big guests, and a very special Friday Big Opinion on the way. We're making broadcasting history, so do join me for the journey. Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Bring your own drinks. The admission is free. And on tonight's show, co-founder of TalkSport Radio and Fleet Street icon Mike Porky Parry, a man that's been fired more often than Suella Braverman herself. Plus the fearless news commentator, a good friend of mine, Stephanie Tecci. Now, Britain's most formidable political double act join us tonight, the Hamiltons. TV news legend Nicholas Owen, here alongside one of our legendary GB News viewers. Watch out, it could be you. And Britain's best historian, Andrew Roberts. So, folks, my Friday Big Opinion is on the way. But first, the news headlines with another big star of tonight's show, Aaron Armstrong.
Thanks, Mark. A very good evening to you. It's just after 8 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor is considering cutting inheritance and business tax in an effort to win over Tory MPs with his autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt had said tax cuts this year would be virtually impossible. Now, after a recent fall in inflation, he says it all depends on how much the economy is growing.
The best way that we can reduce the tax burden for everyone is to grow the economy. There's no shortcut. If we grow the economy, if we support manufacturing businesses like the one I'm visiting today in Sheffield, that means that we have more money to reduce the tax burden, but also to invest in public services like the NHS. So we will always take a balanced approach, but putting the economy first.
Part of that investment, the Chancellor mentioned, he announced £4.5 billion in investment for British manufacturing in an attempt to boost sluggish growth rates in the UK. Car makers, aerospace companies and clean energy firms will benefit from the funding, which will cover a 5-year period and will become available in 2025, after the next general election. Rishi Sunak has denied tinkering with the Rwanda policy after his former Home Secretary suggested his plan to save the scheme would fail.
Will the Prime Minister rescue the Rwanda plan, Mrs Braverman?
Well, Suella Braverman, who was sacked this week, claims his attempts won't work unless he opts out of the European Convention on Human Rights. And she says the proposed new treaty and legislation are simply a tweaked version of a failed Plan A. She warned Rishi Sunak his proposal will get bogged down in the courts, but the Prime Minister says he'll take on anyone standing in his way. The Labour leader is refusing to back calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, claiming his party remains united despite this week's rebellion. On a visit to a gas terminal in Aberdeen, Sir Keir Starmer indicated his position proves he is the right person to be the next Prime Minister. However, GB News understands there's concern within the party about a growing rift between Sir Keir and the Scottish Labour leader. Anas Sarwar's MSPs look likely to back an amendment in Holyrood next week that will call for a ceasefire. A man who murdered a school teacher in Ireland has been jailed for life. 23-year-old Aisling Murphy was killed while exercising on a canal path in Tullamore in January last year. 33-year-old Joseph Puska has denied the murder, but he was convicted by a jury last week. Outside court, police, who described the case as a monstrous crime, praised the victim's family for showing courage and dignity during the trial. £8.3 billion has been promised to fix what the Prime Minister's described as the scourge of potholes. The funding for road maintenance in England will be available to local authorities over the next decade. It's part of a government plan to spend money saved by the scrapping of the northern leg of HS2. However, the estimated cost of improving local roads is £14 billion. And Everton have had a 10-point deduction for breaching the Premier League's financial fair play rules. An independent commission found Everton's losses during the 2021-22 season amounted to £124.5 million. That's almost £20 million more than the allowed limit. The penalty leaves them on 4 points and they're in the league's relegation zone. The club, though, says the deduction is wholly inappropriate and it will appeal the decision. Well, this is GB News, live across the UK. I'll be back with more a little later, but now it's over to Mark.
Thanks, Aaron. Should the Tories get rid of Rishi Sunak and call a snap election with the new leader? Does going into the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? And was Winston Churchill a hero or a villain? All of that plus much more on Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. First, my Friday Big Opinion. Breaking tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, remember him, has received a surprise visit from new Foreign Secretary David Cameron. The two men were able to compare notes on what it's like being a politician that no one talks about anymore. Yes, what a week. David Cameron is back. Before all this happened, he was presumably sat at home with a nice cup of tea, heated blanket on him, watching a classic episode of Escape to the Country when the phone rings. He thinks it's Ocado, who are late with his order of hobnobs, but days later, chillaxing Dave, Mr. Hugger-Hoodie, the genius behind the big society, which wasn't as big as he hoped. We've all been there. David Cameron is back and back in high office as Foreign Secretary. But he's hardly going to be match fit, is he? It's like giving Gaza a call for the England squad. No, there's really only one winner in this whole story. Samantha Cameron, his long-suffering missus, who will be delighted to get him out of the house. How many more stories has that poor woman had to listen to about his bromance with Nick Clegg? The return of David Cameron does make you wonder which other ex-PMs Rishi could bring back. John Major famously upset the odds against Neil Kinnock in 1992. Could he mastermind an unlikely Tory victory? The economy's on the mend, but we know who could put a stop to that. Dear old Liz Truss. Too soon? Or with the help of medical science? Margaret Thatcher. We can but dream. No wonder viewing figures for Coronation Street and EastEnders are in long-term decline when you've got the Westminster soap opera to watch. Rishi Sunak does his best impression of nasty Nick Cotton, sacking lovable barmaid Suella Braverman, whose only crime is pulling a few pints of the cold, hard truth. But hell hath no fury, like a Home Secretary scorned. I'm not saying her letter to Sunak was scary, but Braverman wrote it using cut-out letters from a newspaper, like serial killers do. And the rest of it was written in crayon, green ink, and signed in her own blood. More bad news, as the PM's Rwanda plan is deemed unlawful. When did it become controversial to protect the borders of a country and enforce the law? If nothing else, it's unfair on people legally claiming asylum. Now, here's the thing. The illegal crossings are an economic, national security and humanitarian disaster. But that's not the real problem. If it's one thing the British people don't like, it's people jumping the queue. I've seen it many times at my local Tesco Express, and it can turn ugly. There you go, Mike Parry, words of wisdom. So if Rwanda doesn't work, Sunak has said he will do whatever it takes to tackle the illegal crossings. Now, what would that involve? Royal Navy interceptions in the Channel? A Donald Trump-style wall? If it comes to it, and I know it's unethical, but how about they use loudspeakers at Dover to blast out the greatest hits of James Blunt? If that doesn't stop the boats, nothing will.
Ed Sheeran.
Oh, Ed Sheeran. That crosses a line, Mike. Now, the Tories are toast, right? Tories are toast. But Keir Starmer is in no position to gloat. Current infighting within Labour and a flurry of resignations makes what's happening in the Middle East look like the Queen's garden party. Basically, we're in trouble. Having to choose between Labour and the Tories is like having to choose your favourite cray. There's really only one thing for it. I think this democracy thing is not working out. Let's just install my friend, the honest, no-nonsense and debonair Richard Tice, the thinking man's Roger Moore, to run the country. With Gaza as his foreign secretary, what could possibly go wrong? Or how about our soon-to-be king of the jungle, Nigel Farage? Is he our next PM in waiting? One thing's for sure, he couldn't do much worse of a job. This is Friday Night Live, and I am Mark Dolan. Reaction now from Fleet Street legend, co-founder of TalkSport Radio, Mike Porky Parry, and fearless news commentator and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci. Stephanie, what a week. Are you happy to see a politics legend like David Cameron back in the ring?
No, because people are acting like it's Return of the Mac, and it is not Return of the Mac in politics. I remember in 2010 when I was driving in uni and they announced that David Cameron was going to be the Prime Minister, there was this doom that came in my stomach, and that same doom came back this week. Can't Rishi get any fresh talent to be a foreign secretary? Why do you have to get Dave, who deserted us as soon as Brexit came? He gave up his role as Prime Minister, and we think he's going to be this person at this crucial point in time to help us with foreign news. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because, Mike, they say that politics is showbiz for ugly people. You've got to say David Cameron is a name. He's box office.
He might be box office, but his reputation and his track record in international affairs in this world is worse than any leader of any Western country. I used to go to Libya when Colonel Gaddafi ruled Libya, OK? Because I was told time and again the Americans were going to bomb it. On my fourth visit there, the Americans did bomb it, and they bombed the hotel I was in, the El Qadira, OK? And so I'm not very happy about that. But I can tell you, Libya was a very well-run country. People knew exactly what the rules were. They knew exactly how to behave. They knew that if they behaved properly, they got good health care. They had good schools. They had good transport and communications. And guess what? David Cameron thought it'd be a very good idea to go and see his little mate, and I mean his little mate in France, Sarkozy, and they thought, you know what? If we go and liberate Libya from this tyrant, Gaddafi, they'll build a statue of us in Green Square. And I've been to Green Square, and believe me, it's a big square. What did they do? They smashed up the country, and that is one of the reasons why millions of people are displaced in the Middle East, and hundreds of thousands of them are heading for our shores in little black boats across the English Channel, because David Cameron, as a Prime Minister, like lots of them do, wanted his war, didn't he? Mrs Thatcher's the only one since the Second World War who won a war in the Falklands, and ever since then, Prime Ministers in Britain want their war. He picked a war which is utterly ridiculous. The Libyan people did not want to be liberated. They were happy, but David Cameron wanted to liberate.
They were happy. Colonel Gaddafi, he was no Abraham Lincoln, was he, for goodness sakes? He was no JFK. He was a mass murderer and corrupt.
95% of the people in Libya...
No wonder you liked him.
95% of the people in Libya were actually very happy under the Libyan regime, under Colonel Gaddafi.
Who told you that? Colonel Gaddafi spokesman?
Colonel Gaddafi himself.
Did you meet Gaddafi?
I bounced up and down on Colonel Gaddafi's bed.
On his what? It's a family show, mate.
No.
Look, I'm on before 9
Let me just tell you, he used to have a Bedouin tent outside the Al Jazeera compound in which he lived, OK? And he invited me in one day because he had, you won't believe this, 2,400 videos which were all of his speeches that he'd given over the years. He said, I will show you some of my speeches. And he invited us, I was with a group of Fleet Street colleagues, to bounce up and down his bed because he said it was the most expensive bed in the world.
Wow, my goodness. Well, look, I tell you what, those stories are legion, but we can't bring back Margaret Thatcher. We can't.
No, we need Maggie right now.
We can't bring back Colonel Gaddafi, although Mike's gutted about that. But, I mean, we lack that kind of leadership. Someone like Thatcher, love her or hate her, she had a plan.
You know what, I'm all about women being in power. I think if we had a woman doing the job right now, I don't think we'll be in half the problems that's going on in the world. It will be so sorted right now, because I don't know what Rishi's playing at, Mark. I'm just like, now is the time where you need your strong candidates to go to war for you, for the Conservatives, and David Cameron is not it.
Well, listen, you are the queen of the political truth bomb.
I try.
Last week, you broke the internet with a line on my show. You said Suella Braverman is too big for her boots.
Ding dong,
I tell you what,
gone.
Though, couldn't we do with that kind of leadership right now? What about Suella for PM?
No. There is no I in team, and Suella's starting to prove that she was a poisonous snake that was in Rishi's cabinet. And the thing is, her coming out with all these ideas now, I'm like, you've been under 3 Conservative leaders. Why didn't you come up with these ideas before? Why are you trying to do it now?
Well, Mike Parry's not happy with poisonous snake.
Well,
she is poisonous.
By the way, it's not
She's
a real
very
ale,
poisonous.
No. I liked a lot of what Suella Braverman said, and as usual, you know, the old, clutch the pearls, heart beating, liberal left. Oh, she's telling the truth, and the truth hurts.
Poison.
But Steph, where I do go with you is, do you remember Mrs. Thatcher when we were involved in the European debate in her days? She wore a jumper with all the flags of all the European countries on it. She said, look, I'm not sure I'm with Europe, but I'm going to go there and try and make it work. David Cameron went there when he was our Prime Minister, and they said, no. We don't respect you. You're not going to make it work.
And over is Suella.
Go back to Britain.
I would bring Margaret Thatcher back for that kind of leadership. She wasn't perfect, but I think she transformed the country.
And she could be respected.
If you could bring...
And she respected people.
Well,
and that's what Suella doesn't do. Right now, Suella's thinking being jobless is a lifestyle for her choice. It's a lifestyle choice for Suella right now.
Mrs. Thatcher actually believed in things in her own head. Do you see what I mean? And she took her beliefs into her politics.
There you go.
Most other politicians just sway in the wind like this.
Let me tell you.
What do the people want me to think?
Let me tell you, my Friday All-Stars don't agree with each other. That's the point of the show. That's why we've got them here. Coming up, should the Tories get rid of Rishi Sunak and call a snap election with the new leader? Britain's most formidable political double act, the Hamiltons, are next. You're watching Mark Dolan on GB News, Britain's news channel. Brilliant. Stephanie, what a start. I've got to say, I'm very happy with it.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Does going into the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? I'll be asking TV news legend Nicholas Owen and a top GB News viewer. It could be you. But first, with the Tories sinking in the polls and with Sunak showing no signs of turning around his political fortunes, should the Tories get rid of the Prime Minister and call a snap election with the new leader, potentially Suella Braverman? Now, we're going to get to the Hamiltons in just a moment on this, but let me ask you what you think about this, Stephanie Tetchy. Do you think that actually the Tories should now get rid of Rishi Sunak, given the fact that it's almost certain he's going to lose the next election?
No. What is this, like Big Brother, where you're just trying to evict a housemate? We're talking about the Prime Minister of this country, and we've had 3 of them in the last 5 years.
All right, well, should we have more? What do you think about this? Let's speak to Britain's most formidable political double act, Neil and Christine Hamilton. And folks, great to have you with us. What do you think about this, Neil? The idea of getting rid of Sunak. The Tories have got nothing to lose.
Well, I don't know that Sunak really exists. I mean, he's such an insubstantial person. He's a hologram. I think you can put your hand right through him. I think the problem for the Tories goes much, much wider than just the personality of the current Prime Minister. The whole Conservative Party in Parliament has been refashioned as a result of changes that David Cameron made after 2010 to modernise the Tory party, to put more power in the hands of Conservative Central Office to select candidates. And so you've got people like, I can't remember her name now, as the MP for Newbury, who's just been made a minister, who took the knee for Black Lives Matter just a short time ago.
And worked for Hillary Clinton.
And worked for Hillary Clinton as well. So, you know, the Tory party in Parliament is really just the Social Democratic Party reborn. And they'll never do what is needed. If Lee Anderson were the leader of the Tory party, then things would be very, very different. And, you know, I would then even consider voting for it.
Well, there you go. I mean, I just wonder. I mean, I've always been supportive of Sunak, but he looks like a dead man walking, Christine. What about one last roll of the dice? The Tories have nothing to lose.
Well, I feel like Brenda. I think she was from Bristol, who, when she was told that there was going to be another election, she said, "Not another one." You remember? Everybody remembers Brenda. No, they simply can't. And then we've had this revolving door of people. And it isn't just the Prime Minister that's been in the revolving door. I mean, how many Home Secretaries have we had in recent years? How many Health Secretaries have we had?
Housing
How many
Secretaries?
Education
16.
Secretaries? It's utterly ludicrous. These people breeze into a department and then they breeze out again, or they're thrown out. Sunak has no real mandate within his party. That's the trouble. And we now know that he was already plotting. He'd set up this, this website address, etc., etc.
Ready for Rishi.
Ready for Rishi, that's right. Well done.
Oh, yeah.
When Boris was still firmly, well, not firmly, but Boris was still there. So I think, as Neil says, he is a stake in the grass. But the idea that they can honestly start again and have another leadership election, they are riven asunder as it is, and that would just literally split them in pieces. It's crazy. They've just got to keep going with what they've got and hope that the weather changes.
Now, I just wonder, I think they're in Vegas metaphorically, and I wonder whether they bet the house on Braverman. I don't know. I mean, it's the Titanic. Maybe we move some deck chairs around the surface of it. Listen, we've got a developing story. My team have just passed this to me, Christine, and this is developing in the last few minutes. Whatever it takes, Rishi Sunak hints at a general election to get the Rwanda deal back on track. What do you think about that idea, Neil, of a sort of back me or sack me election based on stop the boats?
Well, I'd be in favour of a back me or sack me election, but not on that, because as Suella has rightly said in an article today in the Telegraph, you know, this is a half-cock policy that isn't going to work anyway. It doesn't actually address the problems which the Supreme Court judgment actually raised, because the fundamental basis of the Supreme Court judgment was that they said that the government of Rwanda couldn't be trusted to observe the obligations which the Supreme Court wanted to impose upon it. So merely declaring Rwanda a safe country would be like just declaring that it's going to rain on Wednesday next week. And so Parliament simply doesn't have the power to change the facts of life, although it can change the law. No, the only real solution to this is to have an in-out referendum, as we did for Brexit, on membership of the European Convention on Human Rights and the UN Refugee Convention, because those are the two roadblocks to being able to control our borders. This is an issue we thought we had actually resolved in the referendum 7 years ago. We've had a Conservative government for 7 years since the referendum, and what change has actually been made in all the corpus of EU laws?
Okay.
The entanglements that we are in internationally. They've done absolutely nothing. That's why they'll lose. And by getting rid of Sunak doesn't actually solve the problem, because the overwhelming majority of Tory MPs actually believe in the Titanic carrying on its journey towards the iceberg.
Okay, listen, stay there. Ollie, can you bring in, with your technical expertise, my brilliant pundits tonight? We've got Mike Parry and Stephanie Tecci, and get their input on this as well. A stunning developing story passed to me by producer Mark. Rishi Sunak has hinted he will call a general election after he promised to do whatever it takes to get his Rwanda migrant deal back on track. Mike, what do you think about this idea of a stop-the-boats emergency election?
Yeah, well, I think it's absolute nonsense, and it's another,
Not nonsense for my viewers and listeners who want this resolved, Mike.
No. It's another throw an idea into the air and see which way the wind spins it. I think Neil and Christine know more about politics than me. We'll all remember Ted Heath, won't we? When Ted Heath said, right, we'll have an election and the electorate can decide who's running the country. Is it the trade union barons or is it me, the Prime Minister? And the country said, it's the trade union barons. Actually, it's the coal miners running the country. So I think that's an extremely foolish thought to put into people's heads. You won't do it anyway. I think what he's trying to do, isn't he, is he's trying to say to those backbenchers. And by the way, when Neil and Christine said, he's got no mandate, he's still got a 65-seat majority in the House of Commons. He should be able to say, I'm pulling us out of the ECHR, whether you like it or not.
Well, I know you like pulling out, Mike, but I don't know whether that will wash with the public. What do you think? I'm going to come to Stephanie in a second, but Christine, you're itching to speak.
Well, I just want to say one very brief thing, and that is, if I hear Rishi Sunak say one more time, I will do whatever it takes, I shall scream, because he doesn't follow through. He was saying it during COVID. I'm fed up with that phrase. That's all I wanted to say. Over to Stephanie.
OK, well, listen, let's get another developing story. And the very well-respected politics professor at the University of Kent, Matthew Goodwin, has been on Twitter. And my goodness, what a corker. I don't know if we've got the tweet, but it's really spectacular. And I think it's quite good news for Neil Hamilton, who is, of course, the leader of UKIP. And here is the tweet. And here's what he has to say, Matthew Goodwin. The Reform Party's average vote is now up to 10.3%. from just over 5% a month ago. 1 in 5 Conservative Party voters from 2019 have now jumped ship. So make no mistake, a new revolt on the right is brewing. Stephanie Tecci, that's a bombshell bit of information there. An opportunity for Richard Tice, for Neil Hamilton and many others on the right, potentially Nigel Farage in the long run.
I don't believe I'm saying this, but I actually do feel like it's time for a new party, a new superpower in this country. We're disillusioned with the Conservatives. Like, we've had almost 15 years of just pure misery with them. Labour under Sir Keir Starmer, we don't know what direction he's going. So maybe we do need that new party to come and actually back their talk and come with interesting policies which we can actually support.
Yeah, listen, this is good news for you, Neil. If Reform UK have doubled their support in a month, you're going to get support too. You're running candidates across the country next year.
Yeah, and isn't it stupid that we might be running candidates against Reform, they'll be running candidates against us? If there's one thing that this poll tells us is that all those who fundamentally believe in the same things should join together and have a united front against this consensus government that we've had for the last 25 years, because there's been almost no difference between the Tories under Cameron and all the others in between, Sunak and Blair, going right the way back to 1997. And fundamentally, we need a reset in British politics so that, as we thought we'd achieved, but actually didn't in Brexit, we had the people taking control once again of the political system. But instead of that, we've got a deracinated elite who are much more interested in scratching each other's backs and telling each other how wonderful they are, rather than actually representing the true interests.
Did you just say deratinated? I actually had a deratinated coffee earlier today because it keeps me awake. Christine, before you go, thank you for joining us on a Friday night for the very first inaugural episode of Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. If you weren't with us tonight, what would the Hamiltons be up to on a Friday night?
Ooh, saucy.
Oh.
Well,
is it before the watershed or
clean answer, please, Neil, and don't tell me the truth.
We would be having a cosy night in. Supper is all ready. As soon as we've finished with you, or rather you've finished with us, we'll be going and have, honestly, nothing very much, just sausages and a few rehashed vegetables that were left over.
We've got tempura sushi prawns or something, brother.
Oh. Neil, if he goes anywhere near a supermarket, he goes at the right time and he scoops up as many yellow stickers as he can find. So we've got yellow sticker sausage, preceded, as he says, by
sounds like a win-win.
They were £1.
There we are.
That is fantastic. You're very lucky to get a bit of Neil Hamilton's sausage, and more power to you. My thanks to the Hamiltons. We'll catch up very soon. Brilliant stuff. Folks, a really, really busy half hour to come. Does going into the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? I'll be asking TV news legend Nicholas Owen and a top GB News viewer. It could be you.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
You're watching Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Was Winston Churchill a hero or a villain? I'll be asking Britain's top historian shortly. But first, Nigel Farage is going into the jungle. The show starts on Sunday. Will Britain fall in love with the most consequential politician of his generation? If it goes well, does a successful stint on I'm a Celebrity pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? Fabulous GB News viewer Sue in Cheshire will join us in just a moment. But first, let's get the views of TV news legend Nicholas Owen. Nicholas, great to have you on the show. If it goes well for Nigel, that's good news for this channel. It's good news for his TV show, but potentially good news for his dream of entering number 10.
Well, if he has that dream, I'm not sure he does really. But looking at the history of this programme, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, I'm not sure it's any sort of path to number 10, certainly. I was just having a look, Mark, knowing I was going to talk about this, had a look at the people who've been doing it down the years. I mean, you know, Matt Hancock, we remember. Yeah, well, enough said, eh? Nadine Dorries, Edwina Currie. But listen, this is the one that struck me when my eyes splitted through it, that, oh, God, whatever happened to Robert Kilroy Silk, for those with very long memories. Now, this man was actually the founder, really, of UKIP, and he and Nigel were quite rivals at the top of UKIP. Eventually, Nigel came out ahead. But the point about this thing is, I think the public are they're quite bright enough to distinguish between people larking about in the making lots and lots of money, and that will appeal to Nigel, I have to say to you, and somebody who's actually sort of... There's always this argument, isn't there, that somehow these people, by going in the jungle, someone like Kezia Dugdale, who's she? Former Scottish Labour leader. See, you've forgotten about her, haven't you? But they all say the same thing. Oh, I'm going to be appealing to a younger audience. They're going to see another side of me and all this sort of thing. I'm making politics more interesting. I don't think so at all. Nigel's a lovely, great chap, wonderful company. I think he will be very, very watchable. But as a path to political greatness, nah.
Well, that's interesting, Nicholas. Do stay with us, and let's also speak to the brilliant GB News viewer, Sue in Cheshire. And Sue, I agree with Nicholas when he says that he's not sure that Nigel dreams of being in number 10. But I'm certain that Nigel has future political ambitions. Do you think if it goes well in the jungle, that will make his political future a brighter one?
I'm not sure. It depends on how it goes. I think he is taking a really, really big gamble with this because he could be chucked out on the first, although I know ITV won't want that because they're paying him so much. But, you know, he's always been a really, a real gentleman. He's always had a lot of gravitas.
Yeah.
And he's always, I love him. And I agree with most of what he says, but I don't think he would come out any better than he went in. And I think possibly even less because of losing his image, if you like.
Well, that's very interesting. Let's bring in Stephanie and Mike, my pundits, tonight. And I just wonder, Mike, whether Nigel Farage is going to do with the whole country what he does with anyone that meets him, which is charm the socks off them.
Well, Nigel's presentation is immaculate, isn't it? You know, he always turns up in a beautifully tailored suit, shirt and tie, delivers it straight down the camera to you, and I'm riveted by every word he says. I'm encapsulated by his interpretation of life in this country, which he can see so clearly and millions of others can't. Now, if he can get that over to the greater audience by adopting the same sort of intelligence, logic and direct thinking, even though he'll have a hat on in the jungle, that will come across brilliantly. And it will work for him, not against him. People won't say, oh, that Nigel Farage must be the end of his career because he went off to the jungle and wore a funny hat and a pair of shorts. I think they'll say, what an opportunity to listen to what this man's got to say bluntly and straightforwardly for the first time.
Stephanie, that's why Nigel's gone into the jungle. He wants people to get to know him. He wants younger viewers to engage with his ideas. Will it work?
No, Mark, that's not what he's about. He's gone in there for the £1 million paycheck and he's ruffled a lot of feathers already from viewers thinking, why are we paying this man who's already well paid £1 million to go on I'm a Celebrity? To be honest, I think he needs to be careful of career suicide here. We know the GB News viewers love Nigel and we give him that freedom of expression. He is now going on a mainstream channel where people get cancelled for their views. He's going to be in a jungle surrounded by people who didn't vote for Brexit, people who are very sensitive about freedom of speech. So if he's not careful, he could say the wrong thing and it will be politics suicide.
Well, there you go. That's interesting, isn't it? Nicholas Owen, career suicide, says Stephanie Tetchy.
Well, it rather depends what anybody thinks Nigel wants to do in the future, doesn't it? It comes back to the start of our conversation, Mark, doesn't it? Being Prime Minister, well, first of all, he's got to get himself a party together because he actually, what's happened is that every party that Nigel's been associated with in one shape or form sort of collapses from under him, doesn't it? He disappears off. And you can't be Prime Minister without an enormous political machine behind you. I think Nigel's in it for I think part of it is he's got a terrific ego, which is great, which is fine, and we all expect that, and we all accept that. But he really, I think it's just the exposure, won't do GB News any harm, that's great. But I don't think he will see it as just a way of chiselling out a new political venture. I really don't. And £1 million, are we sure about this? That seems an extraordinary amount of money.
Yes, I am.
Yes, well, Stephanie knows. Stephanie has her finger on the showbiz pulse. Michael, you're very excited about this.
Yeah, what I want to say is that, look, Nigel already has an audience, but they're a very loyal audience, you see what I mean? And they're a GB News audience, so they switch on every night to listen what they know Nigel Farage is going to say. What I'm saying is this is a great opportunity because there's going to be millions of people who've never come across Nigel Farage before, except for thinking, I don't like him, who are going to have to listen to him because it's not the Nigel Farage show. It's not the Nigel Farage show. No. It's a huge show with lots of people, and he's one of them.
And those people are going to be paying. No, they're going to be phoning in to humiliate Nigel Farage. They're going to make him eat kangaroo testicles. You know, they're really going to put him through his paces like they did with Matt Hancock last year. And it didn't change his.
But that's a good thing, isn't it? Because he's going to be tested, and therefore we find out how he reacts to these tests.
OK.
Is it a mark of leadership?
Sue in Cheshire, you are the last word, so you get the last word. Could Nigel be stitched up by TV producers and editors with an agenda?
Yes.
Yes. They've all got an agenda, haven't they? And I think they've got an agenda before they even asked him to join the programme. I think they want to humiliate him so that he has less power, really, over people who watch him, because all the ones that watch him love bits. But the main media or the other media other than GB News, they all hate him. The same as they hate GB News itself, and they're always criticising him and us.
There you go. Well, listen, my thanks to TV News legend Nicholas Owen and legendary GB News viewer Sue in Cheshire. We'll catch up soon. But coming up on Friday Night Live, as a TV commentator this week brands him a war criminal, was Winston Churchill a hero or a villain? Should we be ashamed that this man was our Prime Minister? I'll be asking Britain's top historian next. Plus, I've been conducting an exclusive poll. Does a successful stint in the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? The results are in. I shall reveal all next. Michael, thank you.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. I've been conducting an exclusive poll. Does a successful stint in the jungle pave the way for Prime Minister Nigel Farage? Well, the results are in, and 62% say yes, 38% say no. There you go, another victory for Nigel. Now, you won't believe this story. Muhammad Hijab, a Muslim philosopher and scholar, speaking on Piers Morgan's Talk TV show this week, labelled our former Prime Minister Winston Churchill a war criminal. Long considered a greatest Briton, does Churchill have a case to answer for his actions as Prime Minister and as a former military figure and commander? Who better to ask than the author of the definitive Churchill biography, Churchill Walking with Destiny, Andrew Roberts, whose latest book, Conflict, A Military History of the Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine, co-written with General David Petraeus, is out now. Andrew, I'll ask you about the new book in just a moment, but what are the crimes laid at Churchill's door and what is your response to them?
Well, the first one that some Muslim scholars come up with is the idea that he used poison gas against Iraqi tribes in the immediate post-First World War. And this is completely untrue. If this scholar would like to go to Cambridge, Churchill College, Cambridge, he can actually see the document, which I've seen, which makes it quite clear that Churchill was talking about lacrimatory gas, i.e. tear gas, not poison gas like mustard gas or phosphine gas and so on. So it's just a misreading of the facts. Another attack made by German scholars is that the combined bomber offensive against Germany was a war crime. That too is completely wrong. What it did was to stop the increase in armaments production from 1943 onwards and allowed us to help win the Second World War. So that too is not, certainly not under the auspices of then, but not even today, is a war crime.
What about this accusation of Churchill being a racist or even a white supremacist?
Well, he was born in 1874. You know, we're going to celebrate his 150th birthday next year. He was born, I mean, Charles Darwin was still alive. And then it was a widespread, considered a scientific fact that white people were at the top of a sort of evolutionary ladder. Today we know that to be absurd and obscene, in fact, but nonetheless, in those days they believed that. So to attack him for believing something that everybody else thought was a scientific fact, frankly, is a bit like criticising Oliver Cromwell for not believing in socialised medicine.
There's also some debate in Germany about Dresden, which was flattened during the Second World War. Some people think that that was a sort of humanitarian crime. But he was facing Hitler. He had to win at all costs, didn't he?
Also, we were asked by the Soviets to take out Dresden because it was a railway node between East and West, where the Germans were taking troops from one side, one theatre to another. And also, it was the Germans' own fault that their Gauleiters failed to build any air raid shelters. You know, that can't be blamed on Winston Churchill. Also, it's not true that 200,000 people died. That is made up entirely by Nazi propaganda, Joseph Goebbels and others. It was much more like 20,000. A large number of people, of course, but nonetheless, it was a completely justifiable assault.
I want to ask you about what progressive liberals are doing to the reputation of Winston Churchill in a moment. But tell me about your fascinating new book. It's called Conflict, A Military History of the Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine. First of all, why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because immediately after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I thought that it would be very useful to have a book that put the war in its historical context. And so I got on to General David Petraeus, who was, of course, the commander-in-chief of all the coalition forces in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and has a lot to say, as you can imagine, about both of those conflicts, but also earlier conflicts, such as Vietnam. And together we wrote a book about how warfare's changed since 1945. And, of course, it also has a last chapter, which is about the future of warfare. So it's about AI and robotics and cyber and space and drones and so on, misinformation, disinformation. And so it looks forward as well as backwards.
Oh, it's very exciting. What have been the really key significant changes in the evolution of warfare since 45?
Oh, they've been huge, as you can imagine. Well, just that mention of all those lists, especially drones, of course, that's huge. What we've discovered, essentially, was that warfare is not linear. The evolution of warfare is not linear. You can sometimes get wars that are sort of throwbacks. Yeah. You see that a bit in the Donbass region, of course, with barbed wire and no man's land and trenches and so on.
Going back to the First World War.
First World War, precisely, exactly. It's a throwback 80 years. Other wars, though, including other aspects of Ukraine, the use of the iPhone, essentially, to bring in artillery assaults on the tank column that nearly captured Kyiv last year, you remember. Yeah. These are really cutting-edge things.
Fascinating stuff. The book is out now, and it's very important. Particularly, we've got the Ukraine war rages on. People aren't talking about it, but, you know, the issue remains for the world. And, of course, Hamas versus Israel. What's your overview of that? How does what's happening in the Middle East tie in with your book?
Oh, it ties in enormously. We go into Fallujah and Najaf and Mosul and all these very difficult struggles in built-up areas, which is, of course, what the Israeli Defence Forces are trying to do at the moment in Gaza. There are lots of historical parallels. None of them are quite the same, because Gaza actually is bigger. There's a diplomatic time clock that seems to be ticking for the Israelis. It's a much more complicated thing. If anything, I think the closer military analogies are with Monte Cassino in 1943 and possibly also with Stalingrad in 1942.
And what about how Churchill these days is characterised by possibly some on the sort of woke progressive left, sort of labelled, you know, a racist man, someone to be ashamed of? What's your appraisal of this new attitude towards Churchill?
Yes, well, they're trying to take him down, of course, but they're trying to take down a lot of the best parts of British culture and history. And he very much is the greatest hero of them all. He was the man who foresaw the First World War, foresaw the Second World War, created the strategy to win the Second World War, and foresaw the Cold War and told us that the Soviets were a major threat. He's the greatest man who ever lived.
There you go. He defeated fascism briefly, Mike. Well, why does this man have to, you know, have his reputation defended?
Because
Because if you get anybody who's as gigantic as Winston Churchill in modern-day society, you're going to find people who will pop at him because he's so big.
Well, listen, my thanks to the brilliant historian Andrew Roberts, whose latest book, Conflict, A Military History of the Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine, co-written with General David Petraeus, is out now. Can I thank all of you for your company tonight? We'll do it in a week's time. Everything's gone brilliantly, except a lot of criticism for this. Which is my footwear tonight.
Oh.
You know, see it. There you go. It is a boot, because it's very cold outside, but look, it's not to everyone's
They're very
taste.
snazzy, Mark.
Very snazzy. You can judge a man by his footwear. Coming up this weekend. This weekend on Mark Dolan tonight, we have the world's most fearless and maddest adventurer, Tord Pedersen, no-nonsense former government minister, Edwina Currie, and the best Prime Minister we never had, Anne Widdecombe, plus shock new developments on that phone call between Prince Harry and his father, King Charles. We'll get the latest from the Queen of US Royal Reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Also, is there a way back to public life for Prince Andrew? I'll be asking his biggest champion, Lady Victoria Hervey, and she'll be wearing that outfit, I hope. Also, will this government ever stop the boats? I'll get the views of TV news legend John Sargent. Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday 9 to 11, Sunday 10 till 11. Next up, the brilliant Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what have you got for us?
Yeah, cracky show, Mark. Thank you very much. So I went to one of the school strikes today. Should parents be fined for taking young kids out of school to go and protest about what's happening in Palestine? Are people gaming our asylum system by pretending to be gay? I speak to a man who came out on Nigerian television and then had to flee the country. That should be quite interesting. I've also got a Labour MP and his new Rwandan wife to tell us about what a safe country it is after more and more hold-ups. I've got all of that and much, much more, including why have Extinction Rebellion not been sent to prison? In fact, they've been found not guilty despite smashing up a bank. Have we got a two-tiered justice system? And, of course, the best, most entertaining newspaper review you will ever see on national television.
Patrick, thank you for that and great job revealing the true scale of hatred on Britain's streets this week. Very important journalism, brilliant stuff. Patrick's up next. Well, thanks for watching Friday Night Live. We will do it all again in a week's time. And, of course, I'll see you tomorrow at 9 with a big opinion, with a take at 10, with my top pundits and so much more. Thanks for your company. Patrick is next.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The rain is returning tonight, but it should clear tomorrow, so many places will brighten up through the day, and it will be quite a bit milder as well. That's because this area of low pressure is moving in. These weather fronts are bringing the rain, but they're also bringing the winds up from the southwest, hence why it will be turning milder. Still dry and a bit cold this evening across northern Scotland. A little bit of frost likely here, but it will turn milder as the rain spreads northwards. Heavy rain for Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England, where we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. Temperatures dipping down to single figures, particularly early on in the night, but by morning time these temperatures will be on the rise because it will be a wet start for most. That rain particularly heavy over South Wales, southwest England, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads here, but it should be clearing away to the east. It may linger in Kent well into the afternoon. There'll be showers keeping going in western Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for a good chunk of the country, brightens up a bit tomorrow. We should see some sunny spells. It will be breezy, but it will also be quite mild with temperatures getting up to 14, 15, possibly even 16 Celsius. Windy again on Sunday, particularly across the south. If anything, windier here during the day. There'll be a lot of clouds on Sunday, and we'll see showery bands of rain moving across. It won't rain all day. There'll be some drier and brighter spells, but for much of the day it will be cloudy. Not too many showers getting to eastern Scotland. Mostly dry here. Again, pretty mild for the time of year, but feeling colder with the wind.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people